What would you do if your own brother looked you straight in the eye and said, "You're not my sister anymore"? That's exactly what happened to me. And trust me, the story gets so much worse before it gets better. Today, I'm sharing the most toxic family drama you've ever heard, and how I got the ultimate revenge without lifting a finger. So picture this. I'm sitting across from my younger brother at what should have been a simple family meeting. Our dad had just passed away, and we needed to sort out his affairs. But instead of grief or respect, this guy shows up late, doesn't even apologize, and drops this bombshell on me. The inheritance belongs to me, he says with the smuggest grin I've ever seen. Dad would want his real son to have everything, not some random woman who isn't even blood related. Now, let me pause here and give you some context, because this story is wild from the very beginning. My name's Kelly, I'm 29, and I work as a civil servant. My brother Steve, he's 22, fresh out of university, and thinks he's God's gift to the corporate world. Here's the thing though, we share the same mom, but different dads. Steve is our father's biological son, while I'm technically his stepdaughter from mom's previous marriage. But here's what Steve conveniently forgets. Dad adopted me legally when he married my mom. He never, and I mean never, treated me any differently. That man loved me like his own flesh and blood, which made him the most incredible father I could have asked for. My biological dad, complete deadbeat, ran off with his mistress when I was little, leaving us high and dry. I barely remember the guy, and honestly, good riddance. When we were kids, Steve didn't care about our different fathers. We were just siblings, you know? But everything changed when tragedy struck our family. Mom died in a horrific car accident when I was already an adult and Steve was still in middle school. The poor kid was devastated, couldn't process the grief. And somehow he decided it was all my fault. At Mom's funeral, this broken 13-year-old screamed at me in front of everyone. "Why did Mom have to die? It should have been you instead. Nobody would even miss the step-sibling." Those words, they cut deeper than any knife ever could. But what really shocked me was seeing our dad's reaction. I'd never seen him that angry in my entire life. He tore into Steve that day, defending me with a fury I didn't know he possessed. That moment changed everything between Steve and me. Any brotherly love I had left just vanished. As the years went by, Steve became obsessed with proving he was superior to me. But here's the funny part. Every single plan backfired spectacularly. He failed to get into his dream high school, then his dream university. As a broke college student, he couldn't out-earn me with my steady government job. He avoided sports and arts because he was terrified of failing at those two. So what did he do instead? He weaponized the one thing he thought gave him power, his bloodline. "I'm Dad's real child," he taught me constantly. "You're just an outsider who doesn't belong here." At first, I thought it was just misplaced grief talking. But as he got older, the malice behind his words became crystal clear. I got so tired of his constant provocations that I moved out to my own apartment. When he decided to live at home during university, I made sure to coordinate my visits with Dad so I'd never have to see Steve's face. 4 years later, he graduated and landed what he considered a prestigious corporate job. I'd actually bought him a nice tie as a graduation gift, but when he greeted me with his usual arrogance, saying, "Of course I got a better job than you. I've got Dad's genes," I decided to keep that tie for myself. Then life threw us the worst curveball imaginable. Dad got sick. Really, really sick. And before any of us could process what was happening, he was gone. Just like that. No time for goodbyes. No final conversations, nothing. At the funeral, I handled everything as the chief mourner. Dad had been incredibly organized, so most arrangements were straightforward. But then came the inheritance discussion, and I knew this was going to get ugly fast. Steve showed up late to our meeting, offered zero apologies, and immediately went on the attack. "I'm the real child here," he declared. "You're just a stepchild, an outsider. Isn't it pretty greedy for someone like you to expect anything?" You know what? I was exhausted, completely drained from years of his toxicity. So I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Fine, I said. I won't take a single penny from the inheritance. But in return, you have to promise never to contact me again for the rest of your life. Deal? His response, like I'd ever want to contact you anyway. Just disappear already. Perfect. The next day, I marched straight to a lawyer's office to make it official. The lawyer tried to explain that as a stepchild, I technically didn't have inheritance rights anyway. But I interrupted him. Actually, Dad adopted me legally. I have full rights, but I don't want any of it. I'm renouncing everything. Now, here's where the story gets absolutely delicious. A month later, the family court finalized my renunciation. I was finally free from Steve's toxicity and all the family drama, but I had one last thing to tell him. I called Steve up and said, "Hello, the renunciation is complete. You should know, from the estate investigation, Dad had some significant." "Shut up," he screamed before I could finish. "I get it, you've renounced everything. Stop pretending to be my real sister and never contact me again." He hung up on me before I could say another word. I just sighed and thought to myself, it's only a matter of time before this guy comes crawling back. And honestly, that thought made me feel even worse about the whole situation. 3 months later, guess what happened? My phone started blowing up with calls and emails. When I finally answered one of his desperate calls, I heard the most exhausted, defeated voice I'd ever heard from Steve. "Listen, I need to borrow some money," he said quietly. "Dad had debts, and I can't keep up with the payments. I already used all his savings, but it's still not enough." "Wait, what?" I was genuinely confused. Sure, Dad had some loans, but if you used all his savings and it's still not enough, how bad is this situation? Steve immediately got defensive and started attacking me again. "Did you know about this? Did you dump all this debt on me knowing what would happen? You have such a terrible personality. Oh, right, because you're just a stepchild. You must be jealous of me, the legitimate son." I couldn't help but laugh. "Right, because I'm the one who hung up when I tried to warn you about this. And I'm the one who blocked all communication. How convenient that you suddenly unblocked me when you needed help." The truth was, I'd learned everything about Dad's financial situation during the inheritance process. I tried to tell Steve back then, but he cut me off completely. So I'd given up trying to help him. "Do you have any idea how hard Dad worked to put you through school?" I asked, frustrated beyond belief. Sure, he had some educational insurance and Mom's life insurance helped, but the house payments, the car loans, all of that had to come from somewhere. Then I delivered the line that felt so satisfying to say. "I'm not your sister, right? So why don't you discuss this with the mortgage company or a lawyer instead of bothering an outsider like me?" But Steve, being Steve, had the audacity to say, "Don't worry about the small stuff. Besides, I'm treating you like a sister even though you're just a stepchild. You should be grateful for that. Come on, Kelly, just give me some money." I hung up immediately and blocked his number, but that wasn't the end of it. This guy didn't know where I lived, and I'd made sure not to leave any clues at Dad's house. Just to be extra safe, I even got a new phone number. But Steve, he found another way to harass me. He started showing up at my workplace. Gone was his usual smugness. He looked genuinely desperate and pathetic. He'd sneak away from his prestigious corporate job during lunch breaks to beg me for money in the city office parking lot. When that didn't work, he escalated. He started staying past my office's closing hours, waiting in the parking lot to ambush me after work. My boss had to move me to a different department because Steve's harassment was disrupting everyone's work. One evening, I'd finally had enough. I dragged him aside and demanded answers. "Stop causing problems at my workplace," I said firmly. "I told you to talk to the loan companies and lawyers." "I already did," he snapped back. "The life insurance covered the mortgage, so the house is fine. The car loan is down to about $5,000, and I renegotiated the payments. That's not the issue. Then what is the issue? I pressed. Steve looked around nervously before finally admitting the truth. Dad had some savings, so I spent it on various things. I went way over budget. Then I borrowed money from a friend, but now I can't pay him back. He's accusing me of scamming him, and nobody else will lend me money. If I go to a loan shark, I'll be in even deeper trouble. The picture became crystal clear. This idiot had spiraled into a financial disaster entirely of his own making. So let me understand this, I said. You kept borrowing money to pay off other debts, and now you're completely stuck. Exactly, he said desperately. I think I'm already blacklisted from legitimate lenders. If you just pay off this one debt, it'll all be over. Just $88,000. Come on, Kelly. When he reached out to grab my arm, I slapped his hand away. There's absolutely no way I'm giving you a single cent, I said coldly. This entire mess is your fault for overspending and making terrible decisions. Why should I clean up after you? Steve's face twisted with contempt. Is this because we're only half related? Stepchildren really are the worst, so selfish and cruel. I got in my car and started the engine. When Steve tried to cling to my door, I pushed him away. You promised never to contact me again in exchange for that inheritance. I reminded him. You've broken that promise, begged me for money, and insulted me repeatedly. I don't owe you anything. If you show up here again, I'm calling the police. As I drove away, leaving him standing pathetically in that parking lot, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete and total peace. But Steve didn't give up. He continued harassing my co-workers, showing up uninvited, calling different departments. Since he wasn't making scenes at the public counters, it was hard to report him officially. Finally, I decided enough was enough. I explained everything to HR and requested a transfer to a branch office in the mountains. It was quieter, with fewer residents, but the work felt more meaningful and fulfilling. I never went back to that old office. And you know what? I don't regret cutting ties with Steve for even a second. Looking back on this whole nightmare, I learned something incredibly valuable. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away and letting people destroy themselves. Steve thought he was so clever, claiming his rightful inheritance and cutting me out of his life. But in reality, he played himself harder than anyone else ever could. He inherited not just Dad's assets, but also all his debts and responsibilities. Meanwhile, I got something far more precious, my freedom and peace of mind. The funniest part, he could have had my help and support through all of this if he hadn't been such a toxic, arrogant person. Instead, his own cruelty isolated him completely when he needed family the most. Now I'm living my best life in those peaceful mountains, doing work that actually matters, far away from all that family drama and toxicity. Sometimes the universe has a funny way of giving people exactly what they deserve. If you've ever dealt with toxic family members or inheritance drama, drop a comment below and share your story. And if this tale of karmic justice entertained you as much as it satisfied me to live through it, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories that prove truth really is stranger than fiction. Trust me, I've got plenty more where this came from. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best thing you can do for toxic people is absolutely nothing at all. They'll handle their own destruction just fine without your help.